is encrypted URLs, but you have to get a different key to decrypt them and so on. So then we pushed all of this onto some public dashboards and reports that we created. So this was done during the elections in India, Brazil, and Indonesia. So we were generating these reports frequently. And a lot of this code is now public, so you just need an Android phone and a list of groups. And our code takes care of the heavy lifting. Like a lot of the bits are just simple Selenium code to browser simulate and then join the groups and export the data and stuff like that. There are some manual bits that still need to be done, but a lot of the heavy lifting is done. You can check it out in my GitHub repo if you're interested in. So one dashboard that we built with this is it's called WhatsApp Monitor. So it's we currently have 3 countries in it. It's a very simple dashboard. It just shows the most shared images, video, audio, URLs, and text messages. So you can aggregate by date. So you say, okay, what are the most shared messages in this time period, or by language or political party, and so on. So it's a very simple dashboard, but right now it's behind a login, but it's you can visit it here, bit.ly/WhatsApp Monitor. So even though it's very simple, it was very, very widely used because the need for WhatsApp data. A lot of action is taking place in these countries like India, Brazil, a lot of the global South countries on WhatsApp, but there's no tools or ways for journalists or civil society or researchers to access such data. Some of our tools are very simple for computer scientists, but then they were widely used by journalists and fact-checking organizations. So, that was the first bit, getting data from public groups. So we did this at large scale, terabytes of data, millions of messages. The second way is to get data from private groups. These private groups also correspond to political parties. So what we did here is we fielded an on-ground survey with around 3,000 political party social media workers in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh in India. So this is India, this is Uttar Pradesh. So this is these 10 districts in red here are the places where we sent our surveyors. This was pre-COVID. So what they did is they went to a political party office in each of these districts and then talked to the social media person there if they could find one. And then they asked if they would add our WhatsApp number, a number that we have, to their groups that the political party manages, right? So that's the strategy. So you go to the office, the party office, do a survey. As part of the survey, you also ask, hey, can you add us to a WhatsApp group? And surprisingly, it worked quite well. We were added to roughly 500 groups that are managed by these political parties. And again, it gave us a lot of data, over 1 million messages in roughly, again, long term, over 9 months. So just for people who don't know Uttar Pradesh, so it's this small region here in orange. It has a population of over 220 million, which is greater than all of these other countries. So it's a very small region, but it's very India is very populous. So, but this is the most populous state in India, so it is somewhat important. And so now what we're doing with this data is we are annotating roughly 40,000 images for various types of things like misinformation, hate, partisan content, and so on. And the idea is to try to understand how political parties are using various forms like these, but also just to understand political campaigns and then build some sort of models for processing images automatically. Can we identify these things like hate or partisanship or misinformation from this data? So that's this project. The final third type of data that we collected is through setting up a hotline number, a dedicated WhatsApp number, where users can forward what we call tips to. So it's called a tip line. And this is how it looks. So it's a WhatsApp number that we advertised publicly. And then people forward content that they want to have fact checked. So here the content says something about, dangerous cosmic rays passing through the earth. Like if you're a member of any Indian WhatsApp group or general WhatsApp, you might have gotten such message, like these sorts of junk forwards that talk about, you just switch off your phone or whatever, things like that. And the idea is we then fact check and send a report back to the user, hey, this is true or not, based on the message. And this is slightly different from the other two methods that I talked about, right? Like, so this is opt-in. So users are sending us data that they want to have fact-checked. So this is slightly more accurate for misinformation. I mean, if you want to study things like misinformation, this is a good way of collecting data. And the Tipline was run by a nonprofit, but it was backed by WhatsApp. So again, during the elections in India, and this was very widely advertised in national and international press. So we got a lot of coverage, and so over 100,000 messages were sent to this number by tens of thousands of users. So this is again a very largish data for WhatsApp. That was a user generated, opt-in, crowdsourced. So now, okay, we have these three methods, right? Like public groups, private groups, and Tiplines. But what is the sampling frame here, right? Like just to understand what part of the WhatsApp ecosystem do we have, what are we missing, and what is the bias in our data set? So the answer, unfortunately, is that we don't have an idea. So one thing we know is that, a lot of WhatsApp content is private conversations. We don't want to look at that, but we're mainly looking at small sets of private group conversations, opt-in content or public group content, but we don't have an idea of what parts of the data landscape, the entire WhatsApp ecosystem, these fall into. But if the end goal is just to study things like misinformation or hate and things like that, we are probably okay just studying viral content, right? Like, so just looking at the top head of the distribution, looking at viral content is enough. And so we have some ways in which we quantify this sort of like what is viral, what can we describe as like how much viral content do we get from this data. And so we compared this Tipline data with the groups data, and we found that the Tipline data already covers a lot of viral content that is shared on the other public group data set. So it's okay to study some of things like viral misinformation and hate and things like that. Okay, so that was about the data sets and the way we collected data. So now I'll go to analysis, but yeah, if there's any questions, I can answer here.
I'm really surprised at the scale of the experiment that took place. Did you know how much effort it would be before you got started on this project?
It was a lot of effort for sure. Like, sending people to talk to 3,000 political party workers is a huge. So if you're talking about that one, so if we knew it was a huge effort, we prepared for it. But one thing is, the part that I'm talking about here was the easy part, right? Like, so we did not expect that a lot of people would add us to their private WhatsApp, like the political party private groups. So that's a side effect of the overall study, which was in general a survey about studying WhatsApp and political party communications. So this is just a side effect. So the major effort went into actually designing the survey, sending these people, getting these people to talk to us, and things like that.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I'm still shocked that you hired 3,000 workers to physically go and find people to join these WhatsApp groups through.
No, sorry, we hired a few dozen people to go and talk to 3,000 people. So sorry that came across.
Okay. Yeah, still was great job.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I'll definitely put the GitHub link here. Let me just quickly do that. Okay, I cannot find it, but I'll just put this one for now, and then, yeah. So, yeah, you can find it there. Okay, so okay, let's quickly go through what sorts of analysis we can do with this data. So first thing is, we looked at image misinformation on WhatsApp using this data, especially the public group data. That's what I'm going to talk about now. And so the reason for looking at images specifically is that images make up over a third of the messages, which is again a really large fraction for a social media platform, which is not the case in other like Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, for instance. And also, over 50% of the content is non-textual, so images, video, audio, and so on. So which is again like not the case usually. So what we did here is we have all those millions of images. So we got a sample of 2,500 images, and we had 3 journalists go through and annotate that that sample for misinformation or not. So this needed experts, so we had to hire journalists and do this job. And this 2,500 was picked in a way that we know the distribution. So it was partly a random sample, partly a sample of popular images, and so on. So, and then what we did is, this is what it said. We built our own custom annotation software, like for the journalists to be able to look at images in context. So you show the image and say, okay, this was the message along with the text message that was shared along with this image, and that's important. And I'll get back to this on the multimodal nature of this kind of task, where we have to look at these images or text in context, in the chat context. And then from this annotation, we found 800 images to be misinformation. So then, because this is not a completely random sample, you have to do some statistical tricks. Like, we use this sort of inverse probability weighting to get estimates of the prevalence of misinformation in the entire data set. So we found that roughly 13% of the messages in our complete data set could be misinformation. So that means 1 in 8 images shared in these groups are could be misinformation, which is a very large number, right? Like I said, these groups are very widely used. So 1 in 6 WhatsApp users in India use this as part of one such public political group. So that's already a few dozens of millions of people. So if their content, their diet is has a lot of misinformation, that's problematic. So then we qualitatively looked at categories of misinformation, of image misinformation. So what is image misinformation? So we found 3 main categories. The first is false statistics and quotes. So these are this sort of like meme-like content. So images with text on them, which either have false statistics, like in this case, it claims to be a BBC survey that declared one of India's political parties to be the most corrupt in the world, which is not true. It didn't happen, because there's also another meme that says the BBC declared some other political party in India as the most corrupt in the world. Again, both of these are false. But there are lots of these sorts of meme-type content, images with text on them, people saying something that they didn't say, or things like that. Very popular, roughly 30% of the content. The second category is photoshopped images. So these are, again, not even like close to any deepfake level Photoshop. Very simple Photoshop, so roughly 10%. So this image, it claims to be the largest snake found in the world. You can easily see and tell that this is Photoshop, but probably for the audience, that sort of first-time internet user kind of population, this is not a trivial thing that they might be aware of. So there's this sort of simple Photoshops, but also slightly malicious, slightly complicated Photoshops. And these two appear to be TV news programs, but they're doctored. So the content here on the red background, the content in text is actually manipulated. These two didn't appear in the news, so they're false content. But if you see it quickly, especially on your phone, you're more likely to think that, okay, wow, this actually appeared on the news, so this might be true. So that's the mental model, and there's lots of such images of false, photoshopped text on claiming to be from mainstream news sources. Okay, so that was photoshopped images, roughly 10%. Then the third type is images that are taken out of context. So here's an old image of an Indian plane that crashed 5-6 years ago. But there were claims that this was an Indian plane shot down by Pakistan, again, the conflict 2 years ago. So it's an old image reshared out of context. So these are, again, very popular. There's a name for this. They're called cheap fakes. This is the opposite of, or the counterpart of deep fakes, because these are very cheap, right? Like you have an old image, you just reshare that out of context. So they're also very popular. So roughly 30% of the content falls into these categories. So if you see, just these three categories make up over 70% of the types of misinformation. And so these are useful for thinking about building solutions for what is misinformation and what is not. I'll get back to the solutions in a moment, but let's move on to the second problem that we looked at. The second problem is about hate speech in our data set. So one thing when we ran or applied a lot of state-of-the-art existing hate speech detection systems is that we did not find explicit hate in our data set. But what we found is instead this thing that we call fear speech, which is a form of hate speech, but it's indirect, it's coded. So this is speech that tries to instill fear among a particular minority. In our case, this is Muslims in India. So here's a few examples. So this is an example of hate speech. It's direct. So it reads, there were celebrations in Agra when Pakistan won the cricket match against India. This is why I hate Islam. See how these Muslims are celebrating, seditious traitors. So it's clearly claiming that Muslims celebrated during this thing, and so they are traitors. So it equates an entire group to traitors, which is a clear definition of hate speech, which is targeting an entire community for certain acts. Then there's this example which talks about in 1378 a part of India separated and became a nation, an Islamic nation named Iran. Not true, but now other regions of India are on the verge of becoming an Islamic state. So please educate Hindus. Hindus should wake up. So that's the kind of statement. So here there's no explicit toxicity or animosity towards Muslims. So it's a mix of factually incorrect statements, along with call for Hindus to unite. Otherwise, the Muslims will take over. That sort of a fear rhetoric, and this is very common across. I mean, it's not just an Indian phenomenon. It's also very common in the U.S. For instance, a lot of anti-Semitic speeches, is this sort of coded. They're coming for you kind of speech. And so in this paper, what we did is we created this very large data set, tens of thousands of annotated, like triple annotated content for fear speech in Hindi and English. So what we found is that this is very popular. So in our data set, roughly 1 in 5 state or messages that talk about Muslims are of this type of rhetoric. So there seems to be some coordinated activity behind this. And in this paper, we try to do some sort of simple NLP models based on this sort of annotated data. We show, how this is a difficult task and what can be done about that. So that's this line of work. And the final thing that we did, again, like a different paper, is the sort of cross-platform information campaigns that make use of WhatsApp to manipulate Twitter trends, so trending topics on Twitter. The way it works is what is called a trend alert in this parlance, which is a message that is sent to the thousands of WhatsApp groups that are controlled by a political party. And the message says, it's part of the message that says, let's together trend this hashtag to demonstrate our support for Modi ji, the Prime Minister of India. And along with that, there is a document, a Google Doc, which contains sample tweets. And this is how the Google Doc looks like. It has a hashtag, a date and time, and hundreds of example tweets. So I'm showing you 3 here for that hashtag. Now, the way the manipulation works is people in these hundreds of thousands of WhatsApp groups who get this Google Doc, they just pick a tweet, copy paste it onto their Twitter profile, right? So here's how it looks. So this is, I'm sorry if this is cut off, but this is the first example from here. And then this is how it looks on Twitter. So a lot of party workers, the political party supporters from the WhatsApp groups, copy paste those tweets onto their Twitter profiles. So this is the same tweet that is just copy pasted here. And again, like if you take the second example, you see the same hundreds of people just copy pasting that example with slight modifications, right? Like so some people here added mentions of others, some people added images and so on. So they do slight modifications. The other thing is that some of these are actually verified users, right? Like, and all of these are actually real users. They're not bots. This is not an automated campaign. This is all manual, so people are copy pasting manually. So and a lot of these accounts are real political party spokespeople, party politicians, or party workers. So this is real people. And this is very effective. So we studied 75 such campaigns, and roughly 69 of them were trending on the day that they were supposed to be. So this works quite well. And the beauty of getting trending, like the importance of a hashtag being trending is that then it is algorithmically amplified. So Twitter will promote the hashtag on their trending list. But also, nowadays they're promoting tweets from people you don't follow, if the tweets are trending and so on. So what we observed is that roughly 40% on average of tweets in each hashtag campaign were not from that Google Doc. So these are organic tweets. So people saw that the hashtag was trending and then added their own tweets for that hashtag. So roughly 40% of the content is organic content, which means that these campaigns were successful enough to get that conversation started about that hashtag. And we use some simple machine learning models to find that over 600 such campaigns were run in the last 2 years, which is a very simple model. So the takeaway here is that these platforms, WhatsApp is a closed platform, so unless you're a part of that group, you don't see that content. But you can use this closed platform to manipulate a much more open platform, set the discussion there, and manipulate trends there and so on. So one platform can influence another platform. So there's this sort of cross-platform nature that's important to understand. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Are there any questions? Okay. Let me quickly move on to the solutions. We're short on time, so I'll not go into the solutions in detail. But we have, again, a huge line of work here. One of the solutions that we are working on is a sort of very end-to-end kind of solution, which looks at getting data. So this is a solution that works in practice. So this is live parts of it. So what it does is, we get data from these Tiplines from users. So users are constantly submitting content to us, on the Tiplines that we're monitoring. So these are high precision content. Then we have some, staff like journalists, fact-checking organizations that we work with. So they have journalists who fact-check this content. And what we are doing is providing them with the tools for like some sort of NLP tools. So these are text similarity, image similarity tools. So they group together similar claims or group together similar images and so on. So just to these sorts of tools that we provide them. And then we then propose some architectures for scaling this up for WhatsApp in an end-to-end encrypted setting. So how can you make use of these tools that the journalists are labeling and fact-checking and push it back to the users? So we have some proposals for that. So that's kind of the overview of the solution. I have some slides here hidden that I will go into if people want to look at the details. But I wanted to spend some time also on just reflecting on the nature of the problems that are being studied here. So one of the important things that is missing in the misinformation, hate speech context in social media, especially in such a social media platform, is this sort of multimodal, multilingual, multi-platform effort, right? Like, so most of the people who think of misinformation either look at it either in a textual component, right? Just look at the text and then the spread of text, or we did just images, right? Like, but a lot of this is multimodal by definition, especially in this sort of chat context where you have this sort of time series of discussions, and all of them are to a large extent connected. So that's very important to think about. And here's a few examples of multimodal hate speech that is not hate speech if it's not inherently multimodal. Like, okay, let's say you have this text statement that says racism is bad, treat white and black kids equally. So this is, it's an example I made up, so it's not real. And then, okay, let's say you have the statement. Let's say you have these two images independently. Okay, you have a monkey and a picture of a person. Then if you have these two together, that's hate speech, right? Like, so if you have each of these independently, it's not necessarily hate speech. So, here the multimodal aspect is quite clear that you should, it's only hate speech if you consider these together. Similarly, emojis play a lot of role in annotation of hate speech. Sorry, this is a huge message that we have in WhatsApp. It's something that we had to deal with during our annotations. So I don't know if you can see, but there's lots of emojis of flags, of green flags, and then of Muslim symbols, and so on, that are used in a very, that describe the hate speech. So it doesn't say anything hateful. We're using that symbol actually conveys hate to that group, right? Like, so it's a very context-driven interaction between text and these sorts of picture, like emoji content, right? Like, so that's another way of multimodal aspect. In terms of misinformation, again, there's a very similar example. So if you have just this image, right, like this is Obama, it doesn't mean anything, but it depends on what is the context in which this image was posted. So if this image says, okay, this is an image of taken at Obama's half-brother's wedding, that's true, it's not false. But if you say, okay, this is a proof that Obama is Muslim, that's false, right? Like, so again, there's this very clear inherent multimodal aspect here. And like I said, like in the chat context, it's really very well defined like that. These images, text, video, URLs, all of them are posted in conjunction, so they play a role together. And also not just the content, but the users who are posting them, the groups that they are being posted in, all of these also become part of these sorts of different modalities that play a role in hate or misinformation or some of these problems. Right. So some of the challenges that we have been facing in trying to build automated techniques and solving some of these problems. So one is, if you have an image, you want to match with another image and find whether this image has already been shared or whether it has already been fact checked. The problem that arises is sometimes there's an image, but there's a variant of that which has a lot of text on it, or it's watermarked, or things like that. So current, like whatever methods that we are using, very simple hashing-based methods, they don't take this into account. And it's also not a trivial problem. You cannot just say, okay, if this image is part of this other image, it is a match or not. I'll show you a few other examples. So here's another example. So image plus text on the left, just an image on the right. But how can you say that these can we say that these two are the same or not? Because it depends on what was said in the text that was shared along with the message image. So there's also these sorts of slight differences in text changing the complete meaning. Again, I'm sorry, this is in Hindi, but these are real examples that we came across in our annotation, in our data set. So these two are very similar images, so you can match them together, but the text, there's changes here in the text, and these really change the message quite a bit. So one is just a very funny meme, one is slightly offensive, slightly hateful towards a certain individual. Then there are problems with multilingual, right? Like all these three images are the same, but the text on them is just translated. But how do you know that these three are the same image or not? So you have to again identify the text on the image, then be able to translate that along with the image content to be able to say that these all are the same images. Then this sort of a thing where we had these categories, right? Like we had this out of context images, we had the photoshopped images, we had the meme images, and so on. So this, I showed you these two examples saying these are photoshopped images, but there are other images which are also fake, but they're not fake because the text on them is photoshopped, but because they're shared out of context, right? Like, so it's very similar in terms of the content or the types of images. These are also claiming to be like breaking news, but these did actually appear on the television in the news. But the problem is these didn't appear on March 31st, right? Like, so that was the diff. So they're from some other time, and so they're just being reshared out of context. So it's again a very hard problem. How do you even tell which is like, detecting which is Photoshop, which is not, which is of what category? And that's what I'll talk about next. So the state of the art for identifying Photoshop redacted images is also not really great. So there's one like CVPR 2019 paper that can detect to a certain extent manipulated pixels. So here in this case, it does a decent enough job. So you give this image, it does detect these pixels here, these pixels here have been manipulated to a certain extent. Okay, that's good, but the problem is a lot of memes are also manipulated, right? Like someone put together. So this is a benign content, just a meme saying something about a wallet, a mobile wallet. But someone put together the picture of this guy, the text here, and so on. Similarly, other examples, it's the same. So, memes are also photoshopped to a certain extent. So how do you identify what is benign, what is not? So that's a hard problem. Finally, there's this sort of multi-platform issue. So there's this case which is very popular nowadays of this child kidnapping rumor that started in Pakistan. It's very interesting. So this is a video. This is two screenshots from a video showing a child kidnapping. So okay, these people on the bike here, they're kidnapping this child. But the video it's a 30-second video. The video it goes on, and in the end of the video, the people just come back and hold this banner. You cannot read it, but it says, it's very easy to kidnap a child. Be careful. It's just a PSA. That was shown in Pakistan as a certain city. Then it just spread like wildfire in India. It was just translated into multiple languages. So, this is one example claiming that, showing that video and saying, 200 child kidnappers have arrived in Bangalore in India. And this is false, but just people have created these sorts of false narratives and just really picked up. So this is a text message. Then there were any images of a group of guys together were claimed to be, okay, these are all child kidnappers, catch them if you see them. It just became like really crazy. So there were screenshots or videos that were parts of real films, like this is a YouTube film, but this is claimed to be again a child kidnapping, shared out of context. So the thing I wanted to say was, it started as a video, but then there were text messages from that. There were screenshots from YouTube. There were messages like images of some other people claiming to be kidnappers and so on. And in the end, it resulted in this huge frenzy for almost 4 weeks, where all these regions in India, they had issues with some sort of violence or people getting killed or things like that. So there were dozens and roughly 100 incidents or so happened because of that. So it's really a very strange interaction of content across platforms, but also across modalities and so on, with rumors just spreading and multiplying. So it's a very hard thing to contemplate and try to quantify like how these things happen, especially because of this sort of multimodal, multi-platform, multilingual nature of that. And so just this one final thought, the thing is probably looking at solutions for these in terms of content is not the right thing to do, right? Like, so maybe just looking at the actors who are involved in this and the incentives that they have in doing these might be the right way for designing solutions for these. And it's not just maybe just looking at finding what content is true, what is not. But maybe that's also not the only solution, because like in this case of the child kidnapping thing, I think some of the rumors are just started for fun, right? Like there's no child kidnapping happening, but someone just said, okay, 200 people are here. to kidnap your children. Someone did it just for fun and just caught fire. So just looking at these sorts of incentives that people may not also be the right way to do it. But I don't have a solution. But I just wanted to mention that. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for that talk, Kiran. Yeah, I have a couple of questions, but I just wanted to open it up to the rest of the people here. Yeah, please take this opportunity to ask Kiran whatever questions you have.
I have one question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in one of your earlier slides, you mentioned that some of the WhatsApp data was annotated by political parties, like partisanship. I was wondering if that's something that you explored, like detecting which political parties some text aligns with, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we're still working on it, but that's part of the thing that we want to do. It's not just a short-term thing. We really want to work on this data set in the coming months/years on exploring various questions of both partisanship and its relation to. We annotated images, but we also have tools for looking at content and so on. So yeah, it's a nice data set to work with.
How would you like to see your work being used?
Yeah, so that was a very good question. So some of these, so I can just show you this slide here. Yeah, so just don't look at the arrow and the community thing. But the idea is, you have various stakeholders that can make use of this research that play a role in developing some of the solutions, right? Like, so you have the users at the bottom where you could think of, developing tools for them, for educating them, providing them with the right intervention. So one thing we're doing now is, developing these sorts of crowdsourced games for educating people, right? Like, so now we have this huge annotated data set that we can say, okay, can we develop a Tinder-style game that educates users? They just play, but they also can know, okay, what is true, what is not. Or you could think of, making use of the community, again, building upon some of the tools that we developed to work with NGOs. I collaborate with some NGOs in trying to disseminate factful information through trusted sources. Or you could think of working with journalists to, again, help with the sort of education dissemination. And we are trying to develop platforms and tools for them to get access to some of this data and the tools. Or you could work directly with the platforms in order to, for instance, we did some work on developing solutions in an encrypted space, right? Like, so how can you make use of content in an encrypted? Like, I could just maybe show that here. So in an end-to-end encrypted setting, you can make use of, so this is an end-to-end encrypted setting. So user one sends content to user two. It's encrypted on the user's device before it's sent to the server, then decrypted on the user two's device. So in this case, if you want to do any fact checking, you will have to do it on the device of a user. So what we propose is this sort of a setup where you have this data structure of hashes or embeddings that we propose, and you push it onto the device, and you fact check before the content is encrypted. So this is, these are kinds of the stakeholders that might use some of this research. I'm already working with a few of them.
And I guess the implication with what you're saying here is that you would want to fact check all content which has been sent through, because I think the Tiplines system was kind of interesting in the sense that you had people just essentially freely volunteering content and data to you to say, like, oh, this could potentially be misinformation. Could you take a look at it? But that was very much, as you said, opt-in as opposed to something which was done automatically.
Yeah. So the idea is not to fact check everything, but have some mechanism in which you could fact check content that is problematic, like these sorts of child kidnapping rumors. So I think people like these kind of rumors that are specific to certain types of users, like the sort of first-time internet users who are not digitally literate, for instance. So that is not the type of population we would get in this sort of Tipline who submit the content to, right? Like, so, and if certain content is leading to things like, violence offline or people being killed and things like that, there is certain things that need to be done for moderating stuff. Like, how do you decide what to moderate is still not clear, but the idea is just to have a way of implementing this technology in a way that is case by case, right? Like, it could either be just content that is opt-in, like the users have submitted, or it could be during periods of like high importance, like elections, or these sorts of when rumors like these are spreading or things like that.
Yeah, it really doesn't sound like an easy domain and like an easy task to solve. And yeah, I definitely didn't even think of the fact that new users using these platforms are yeah, potentially where the most danger of the misinformation actually lies. Yeah, it's a really, really good point. Yeah, guys, well, what other questions do you have for Kiran?
Hi, Kiran. I have a couple of points to make. I am from India, and having lived there until recently, in fact, this couple of things are really very impressive to me here. First of all, as Nihir said before, the scale of this, knowing exactly what you're talking about, just not just from the technical point of view, but the adjoining political milieu of it as well. I think I can truly appreciate how much effort this must have taken. You did mention in passing that you worked with an NGO, with a group about the Tiplines platform. May I ask who that was?
This is Medan. This is a non-profit company. I don't know if it's Medan, medan.com.
Right.
So that.
Also, so towards the end, when you were talking about the fact that probably the content-based verification might not be the most efficient and effective way, I personally do agree with that vehemently, actually. But as you're aware, the reason there is so much stress, especially in the computer science, social media research field, is because the hope is that there's an automated way of doing this. There are obviously non-tech solutions. There's obviously a lot that can be done towards addressing the problem. But the hope is that if there was a way to do this based on content alone, there would be, an algorithmic way of dealing with this, because so much of it is happening on tech platforms. And I do agree with you that because of the whole number of reasons you listed and analyzed, that's not probably the way forward. But the other option that you presented, the actors and incentives things, while I agree with it, it does seem like a very generic solution, and also something that probably does not lend itself very well to the tech solution space. So what I'm wondering is, what are your thoughts around a direction which might be amenable to the tech solution space? I'm completely aware that it's only a part of the solution, but still, whatever part it can play, and as opposed to a completely content analysis based direction.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I think the other like actors and incentive kind of thing is also technical. Like, you could think of that as some sort of network-based techniques for detecting automated process posting or coordinated activity and things like that. So there is still work in that space. So it's technical work in that space. It's a network science-driven kind of work. But the problem also with just looking at content is that on platforms like WhatsApp, because of encryption, content is a hard thing to get, right? Like, so WhatsApp does not have this data that we have, like the scale which we collected. Even WhatsApp does not have this. So any solution will have to be primarily network driven, like, or metadata driven, and so that's the reality. So I mean, and they're like, I mean, now that I think about it, I thought about this. The solution is just you can only look at the sort of very few metadata points you get, right? Like the user phone related metadata that people the company has, or what groups they're part of, like very high level metadata, not what content they're posting. And there's only few like network stuff that you can do. Like, are there, let's say, sort of user group action, like did users post a lot of content in different numbers of groups? So it's a very simple network science problem. So I don't. I mean, so there are practical reasons for not looking at content in itself. Though there are like really interesting research problems that can translate to maybe some of the open network, open platforms. But then network related stuff is also an interesting way of solving some of these problems. And like I said, if you don't care about, if you ignore, for instance, these sorts of rumors and stuff like that for a second, a lot of the disinformation has incentives, right? Like, so, and the incentive is to reach a large number of people. So you invest your resources to reach a large number of people. So if you can cut that off with a network-based technique, that already kind of solves your problem to a large extent. So I think that's not a bad solution.
Thank you.
What about something which was reputation-based, but based on the user? So, yeah, you can, every user has a unique ID, which will be their phone number or something like that, and you can say, here, maybe we have a database of recently spread content which we know to be misinformation, and based on, I guess, the network science that you were saying, and you just build up like a score, like how likely is this user, if they share a message, for this message to be false content or something like that. And then you can say, you're not looking at the content directly, you're just looking at the user's history and how they've previously toyed with misinformed content.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are part of the metadata things that I mentioned, right? Like just looking at overall like aggregate measures, sort of digging deeper, looking at what actual content is. I think that's kind of what WhatsApp does right now. For instance, to identify spam and stuff like that, they look at like if your content has been reported or deleted, they take that into account, and just these aggregate user features. Yeah.
Cool, nice, thank you. Yeah, does anybody have any last questions for Kiran? No, I guess not. Not a problem. Kiran, thank you very much for joining us today. Yeah, I know we did run a bit over, so thank you guys who are still here for your patience. Yeah, honestly, absolutely fascinating talk, and I think we can all appreciate the effort that went into this. It must have been, well, it literally was years worth of studying and research to get it to the point that it has. And I'm glad to see that it's it's getting some lift off, and yeah, people are getting noticing the work that you've done. So yeah, massive congratulations to you on that.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the invite. I think sorry for the technical glitches, but yeah, thanks. I hope people liked it and enjoyed it, took away something from the talk.
Cool. All right, thank you very much, guys, for joining us, and I'll keep you guys updated by email and on Teams as usual. Thanks once again, Kiran.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Bye.